Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. Also on Twitter and Periscope at Vin Armani is my handle there. And we are streaming live on Facebook, on the Facebook page of our content partner Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. Well, it's Monday morning, 10 a.m., and we are broadcasting live from fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Got a great show for you today. Very excited about our guest, someone who has been highly influential for probably a lot of you out there. The author of The Creature from Jekyll Island that really, I guess, broke the real truth about the Federal Reserve and started a lot of people on the path towards more liberty. He's also the founder of Freedom Force International, and we're going to talk to him about a wonderful expo that he's got going on in June. Of course, I'm talking about G. Edward Griffin, so that's very, very exciting. Also today, of course, we got to talk, well, we talked about Manchester last week, and then London happened, so we're going to talk about London. I also want to get into Portland because I think that those three stories really go hand in hand in a very interesting way. We didn't talk about Portland last week. We didn't have time, but I'm almost glad because the way that things have fleshed out over there just really proves what this whole narrative, how this narrative is used by the collectivists, and that's actually what we're going to be talking to G. Edward Griffin about, so it's just absolutely perfect timing. Also, we have some news about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. That's always there in the background ready for us to talk about. And some news, some unfortunate news, but we're going to cover that towards the end of the show about Ross Ulbricht and the situation with that case as it stands. To help me get through all of this today, as always, is my very good friend, co-host, and producer, Mr. Christian Reyes. Christian.
Thank you, Vin.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
It was kind of touch and go today, dude.
Yeah.
Like we had G. Edward Griffin scheduled, and we didn't know, well, was he coming on? But it turns out, yes, he is, and he's here, and he's ready. And I just talked to him earlier, and it's fantastic, and I'm excited. But because I didn't know, I mean, we've got 2 hours worth of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
If he wasn't here. But I think it's very good that he is because so much of this that we're going to talk about is collectivism versus individualism and why that's so important. He's got an upcoming expo called the Red Pill Expo. People can go to redpillexpo.org. That's on the 23rd and 24th in Montana, Bozeman, Montana, which should be beautiful, June 23rd and 24th. So that's really awesome. Great speakers speaking. Robert Kiyosaki speaking.
Nice.
Mike Adams is speaking. Jeff Berwick is speaking.
Wow.
James Corbett is speaking. Of course, G. Edward Griffin is speaking. And a bunch of other people. Sounds really, really cool. But you know, most people want to talk to him about the Federal Reserve, secret societies. Maybe we'll get into some of that stuff because it's super interesting and he knows all about it. But he views collectivism in much the same way. He's come to a lot of the same conclusions that I've come to on my own. You know, that the individualism versus collectivism is a big deal for me. Just finishing up the manuscript for my new book, Self-Ownership, which deals with that in depth, all about making those definitions because I think most people don't even really know, can't even see it because it's never really been defined, but it's going to be great. It's going to be great to talk with him about that. So we talked about Manchester last week and the weirdness there.
Some crazy shit going on.
And then London happens.
Yep.
And the story is just as weird, if not weirder.
Yeah, it's a strange one.
I want to jump into it, dude. I want to deep dive on that. I want to deep dive on Portland. I think we have the time to do at least those two.
Yeah,
so let's just do this news number one, dude. So, okay. This is, I mean, the whole David Icke problem, reaction, solution that we in the liberty scene, and particularly those who are a little more conspiracy theory minded, believe is happening. We're going to lay this London thing out to what this really is. I would advise people to go back and if you didn't see our Manchester deep dive, I'd suggest that you go back and take a look at it. As we talked about narratives, as we talked about how you can manipulate a narrative to get what you want. And I'm going to show you that that's exactly what's happening here. From the jump. Now remember, we started, and it's so weird that this type of shit happens. We started the show last time. At the beginning of this discussion, we started the show by playing a trailer of The Shining, but it's The Shining, the classic Kubrick horror film, cut as a feel-good family film. So we started with a sort of movie reference, a movie metaphor to talk about how you can craft a narrative. What I found so interesting about this was one of the most elaborate and evolved and elegant descriptions of this thing was in the New Yorker. But what I found interesting was who they chose to report on it, and it turns out it's also who they chose to basically write the official New Yorker perspective on the Manchester situation. It was a film critic, their biggest film critic. Let's go to this New Yorker story. I want to read some pieces from this so that we can get an idea of the narrative that's being pushed forward. This is 8 Minutes of Terror at London Bridge by Anthony Lane. Let me just read a little bit to you. On Saturday, on a warm evening in London, there was a terrorist attack. 7 members of the public were killed and 48 were injured. 2 weeks ago, a suicide bomber blew himself up outside a concert in Manchester, killing 22 other people, among them many young women and girls. Yesterday's plan was cruder, employing a vehicle and knives, and closer in method to the attack that took place on Westminster Bridge in March. In that instance, however, one individual acted alone, whereas last night, 3 men were involved. All 3 are now dead. The frightening sequence of events, which unfolded in fits and starts on television and social media, has now become somewhat clear. At 8 minutes past 10 at night, police were called to an incident on London Bridge. A white vehicle had been driven into pedestrians on the bridge. Eyewitnesses, including some who were driving past, initially thought that this might be a traffic accident. That possibility was soon dispelled. Bodies were seen lying not just on the sidewalk, but on the road. The vehicle then crashed outside a pub at the southern end of the bridge, and 3 men got out, all carrying long blades. At least one of the men had a row of canisters looped around his chest. The men started making their way toward a nearby area called Borough Market, entering restaurants and bars along the street and attacking people at random. One witness saw a woman stabbed 10 to 15 times. Quote, "She was going, 'Help me, help me,' he said." Reports of the assailants crying, "This is for Allah," as they ran toward their victims. The scene was described as a rampage. A few steps from the Black and Blue is a pub named the Wheat Sheaf, outside which drinkers, many in suits, having walked over London Bridge from the city, London's main financial district, swarm and talk at the end of any working day. So it was scarcely credible to turn on the television last night and see a photograph of one of the attackers lying on the ground outside the wheat shaft bleeding, with his homemade belt of metal canisters quite visible. These were plainly intended to resemble explosives, but are now said to have been a dummy device, a fine distinction which an armed policeman is unlikely to appreciate. It is as though the murderers wanted not merely to strew fear, the essential purpose of terrorism, but to invite their own destruction at the hands of the law. If so, they had their wish. So let's show Anthony Lane. So it's longer than that. I've read you some excerpts. So this is the guy that you get to do your main story on a terrorist attack? Anthony Lane has been a film critic for The New Yorker since 1993. Before coming to the magazine, he worked at The Independent in London, where he was appointed deputy literary editor in 1989, and a year later, a film critic for Independent on Sunday. In 2001, his reviews received the National Magazine Award for Reviews and Criticism. His writings for The New Yorker are collected in the book Nobody's Perfect. Very interesting, Christian. Like, if you're going to get somebody to craft together a very specific narrative,
right,
or to, it's an interesting mode here, or to look at the official narrative and line it out in a way that makes sense, right? Because his whole job is looking at movie plots and finding plot holes, right?
Very interesting.
So he could skip over plot holes.
Yeah.
He could restate the plot in as elegantly of a way as he wanted, because that's what he does for a living. He looks at movies and he restates the plot.
Wow.
I mean, I'm just saying. It could just be a total coincidence because, that's who's on the terrorism beat. Film critics. You're the New Yorker, and that's your main story. You have, Seymour Hersh is a contributor to the fucking New Yorker. You know what I mean? Like, they've got the top rank of investigative and war correspondence even.
Right.
But for this, no. film critic will do just fine. I just found it interesting.
Wow.
You know, the interesting part about this, and so there are basically two discrepancies in this story that seem very strange. So this kept being pushed, this idea of these suicide belts. It wasn't just him crafting a narrative. You got the CNN thing. Here we have CNN basically saying the same thing. The suicide belts were later discovered to be fake, suggesting that the attackers, this is weird, suggesting that the attackers deliberately used the belts to ensure they would be killed. As though running around with a machete, stabbing people,
Isn't gonna.
wouldn't ensure that you got killed, especially if you rushed a police officer with those machetes. Pretty sure
Yeah.
you're going to get shot. Pretty sure you're going to get killed. No, we've got to put on fake suicide vests. It's funny, this is from the Daily Mail. I'll just read this to you. We don't have the I didn't even attach it because it's just this little piece. This is from the Daily Mail about the canisters by an eyewitness. Gabriel Scioto, who took the photograph of the bodies, told the BBC, this is a quote, "I ran toward the scene. Noticed these men with explosive-looking belts on their chests. They were running, and police officers were trying to put themselves between the men and the crowd. Police ran towards them. More police came, and in a few seconds after a radio call, they shot 3 men down. The canisters didn't look real. They looked like toys. I wasn't too scared."
It's weird.
So not only are we going to do fake suicide vests, but we're going to put very fake things around us, and that's
Yeah.
going to ensure that we get killed.
Fuck.
Even though they don't work, and what we're going to do is we're going to attack people with machetes.
Wow.
Right? So that's the first very strange part. So you say, okay, well, cool. So yeah, if there's somebody now they were shot 50 times. 50 times.
Holy
Hail of
shit.
bullets. So all these people are reporting, and they're like, yeah. Oh, they wore the suicide belts to ensure that the cops would shoot them down. Really? Remember, just like we were talking about, oh yeah, when you've got explosives in a house, you gain entry. Remember the last time Manchester where they blew the doors off? They thought there were explosives in an
Right.
apartment, and they blew the
blew
doors
the
off
doors
with
off.
explosives? Right, that's what you do. So
So
what
you
you
shoot
do when you think somebody's wearing an explosive vest is
Shoot.
you fire a hail of bullets at them.
Jesus Christ.
Right, that's standard police procedure, right? Well, let's see what standard police procedure actually is. You got this police policy here? So, this is from the Daily Mail in 2003. Police learned to deal with suicide bombers. Oh, this is actual, they've trained on this. Every police officer in the country is to be issued with guidance, and by country it means UK, is to be issued with guidance on how to deal with suicide bombers. Barbara Wilding, chairman of the Association of Chief Police Officers National Working Group on Suicide Terrorism, said the police force would be, quote, failing in its duty if it did not issue advice on the scenario of a suicide attack. Ms. Wilding, who is also Deputy Assistant Commissioner at the Metropolitan Police, told the magazine, quote, "We know Al-Qaeda has the capability. These people are martyrs, and for them to live is to fail, and that is the big learning curve for us. Clearly, we would be failing in our duty if we did not take this seriously," unquote. On the general content of the new advice, she said, quote, "It is very simple. Do not intervene and do not challenge. However, details of the guidance will remain confidential for security reasons." A spokesman for the Association of Chief Police Officers said, "Guidelines have gone out to all forces and will be filtered down to all officers." So, the guidelines given to all officers when encountering someone with a suicide vest, it is very simple. Do not intervene and do not challenge. That's a little different than rain a hail of bullets on them. And it was 8 officers, 50 rounds. That was the first part of this thing where I was like, that's really weird. Now, you remember at the end of our story about Manchester, where I noted one thing that we know for sure, we don't necessarily know it in UK, but we know it for sure in the US, is that between, and we even had the numbers, between 2014 and now, over 80 plots have been hatched by the FBI. And these are just the ones we know about because they resulted in arrests. Where the FBI, on its own, will find somebody not associated with the terrorist network who's maybe posted some crazy shit online, will groom that person, make the person believe that the FBI agents are terrorists, and will supply them with money, fake bombs. Remember, we even talked about the issue where they said, go get copper wire and a battery and all of this stuff. Okay. So, is it so unreasonable that perhaps these three guys weren't wearing what they thought were fake suicide vests, but that they had been given suicide vests and told that they were real? Which one is more likely? That all three would be like, yeah, let's wear fake suicide vests and then go chop people up with machetes. Or that they thought they had on real suicide vests. And then they were gunned down before they could tell anybody anything about it.
Right.
I mean, which one is just more believable? And it's made even more believable by the fact that the police will not release the names of the people that they gunned down.
Wow.
We have this unnamed thing here. So, this is from the Mail Online. The suspect, who Mail Online has chosen not to name at the request of police, is one of three men who embarked on a stabbing rampage in London on Saturday night. Gardaí, that's the police in Ireland, have confirmed that an Irish ID card, they found the fucking ID card again, was found on the body of another one of the killers, who is believed to have been born in Morocco but living in Dublin. Police say he was living in the Rathmines area of the Irish capital with his Scottish wife, because lots of Islamic terrorists marry Scottish women, until around 3 months ago, but he was not on their radar. Scotland Yard says it knows the identity of all the killers who murdered 7 and injured 48 in London Bridge and inside Borough Market, but have asked the press not to name them. Very, very weird. So you're looking to find out information about these guys, you would think. You're looking to see if they have a wider network, you would think. Now you remember the Manchester bombing, how did they find out about that one apartment? Because they put the guy's name on the news, they put his picture on the news, and someone who had rented the apartment to him 6 weeks before called the police. This is how you get information. How many times have we heard, anyone with information, please call this hotline? So it's like somebody could have known this guy. Somebody could have had a conversation with this guy. Somebody could have crucial information that if this was an investigation that was taking place the way that police do it, they would release the name. Because without releasing the name, how can you get all the leads that you need?
Exactly. You know what's funny too is they keep these same, like, finding the ID
every time.
Every time. And
every
some
time,
kind of Telegram-ish app or something is involved. Or,
well, let's show the people that last time why we had mentioned why this whole situation might be happening, since you bring up Telegram. Just to refresh people, and if maybe people didn't see last week's episode, let's just play this last show. This little clip from last show.
A name?
Last show, yeah.
Oh, last show.
Purpose. What would be the purpose? Why would you do this? Well, they did take the threat level to critical. They put troops on the streets. Now, buried in the news was the fact that Theresa May, after doing that, she went to the G7 meeting. You got this G7 story? Manchester attack has G7 demanding internet giants crack down on extremist content. The G7 nations on Friday demanded action from internet providers and social media firms against extremist content online, vowing to step up their fight against terrorism after this week's Manchester attack. British Prime Minister Theresa May won solidarity from her G7 colleagues at summit talks in Italy after the suicide bombing Monday at a pop concert killed 22 people, including several children. The G7 also vowed a collective effort to track down and prosecute foreign fighters dispersing from conflicts such as Syria, which May said showed the morphing nature of the threat. As they, quote, as they lose ground in Iraq and Syria, foreign fighters are returning and the group's hateful ideology is spreading online, May said. Make no mistake, the fight is moving from the battlefield to the internet. So, dude, what's funny about this is the comments on that were like, it's not about the internet. This is not about the internet. That's stupid, Vin. Like, no, this is about the globalists, this is about the Jews, it's the Jews, it's not about the internet, don't think it's about the internet. Okay, fine, it's not about the internet. So Manchester happens, she talks about the internet. Then London happens, obviously, since it's not about the internet, she's gonna have nothing to say about the internet, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just see what, Theresa May said right after the London attack.
We cannot allow this ideology the safe space it needs to breed. Yet that is precisely what the internet and the big companies that provide internet-based services provide. We need to work with allied democratic governments to reach international agreements that regulate cyberspace to prevent the spread of extremist and terrorism planning. And we need to do everything we can at home to reduce the risks of extremism online.
So, totally not about the internet at all, clearly. And by the way, this is totally, right? Totally just a reaction. Theresa May, she's totally just reacting to the fact that, yeah, of course, we need more security on the internet, Vin. We just had 2 attacks. It's just 2 attacks. It's just her being reactive. She's just reacting to these 2 back-to-back attacks. Oh, okay, well, let's see if she is. Put up this regulate thing. So here's the story. Theresa May says the internet must now be regulated following London Bridge terror attack, right? So it's following the attack that she says the internet must be regulated, clearly. New international agreements, this is from The Independent. New international agreements should be introduced to regulate the internet in the light of the London Bridge terror attack. The Prime Minister said introducing new rules for cyberspace would, quote, deprive extremists of their safe spaces online, and that technology firms were currently not doing enough. The Prime Minister made the comments outside Downing Street on Sunday morning in the aftermath of the van and knife attack that saw 7 people killed and dozens injured. Quote, we cannot allow this ideology the safe space it needs to breed, yet that is precisely what the internet and the big companies that provide internet-based services provide, Ms. May said. Oh, okay. So clearly she was not thinking about this before any of that happened, Christian. She was not, this was not even something that she thought about, because I totally did not see this story in the same damn newspaper, The Independent, last month on the 19th. Mm-hmm. Before any of this shit happened, on May 19th, why don't you jump to this manifesto? Headline, May 19th, Theresa May to create new internet that would be controlled and regulated by the government.
Wow.
Theresa May is planning to introduce huge regulations on the way the internet works, allowing the government to decide what is said online. Let's remember, this is May 19th. This is before Manchester. This is before London.
Wow.
Particular focus has been drawn to the end of the manifesto, which makes clear that the Tories want to introduce huge changes to the way the internet works. Quote, and this is in their document, some people say that it is not for government to regulate when it comes to technology and the internet, it states. Quote, we disagree. Senior Tories confirmed to BuzzFeed News that the phrasing indicates that the government intends to introduce huge restrictions on what people can post, share, and publish online. The plans will allow Britain to become, quote, the global leader in the regulation of the use of personal data on the internet, the manifesto claims. It comes just soon after the Investigatory Powers Act came into law. That legislation allowed government to force internet companies to keep records on their customers' browsing histories, as well as giving ministers the powers to break apps like WhatsApp so that messages can be read. The manifesto makes reference to those increased powers, saying that the government will work even harder to ensure there is no safe space for terrorists to be able to communicate online. That is apparently a reference in part to its work to encourage technology companies to build backdoors into their encrypted messaging services, which gives the government the ability to read terrorist messages, but also weakens the security of everyone else's messages, technology companies have warned. The government now appears to be launching a similar radical change in the way that social networks and internet companies work. While much of the internet is controlled by private businesses like Google and Facebook, Theresa May intends to allow government to decide what is and isn't published, the manifesto says. The new rules would include laws that make it harder than ever to access pornographic and other websites. The government will be able to place restrictions on seeing adult content, and any exceptions would have to be justified to ministers, the manifesto suggests. The manifesto even suggests that the government might stop search engines like Google from directing people to pornographic websites. Quote, "We will put a responsibility on industry not to direct users, even unintentionally, and this is important, to hate speech, pornography, or other sources of harm," the conservatives write. The laws would also force technology companies to delete anything that a person posted when they were under 18. But perhaps most unusually, they would be forced to help controversial government schemes like its Prevent strategy by promoting counter-extremist narratives, aka propaganda. Quote, "In harnessing the digital revolution, we must take steps to protect the vulnerable and give people confidence to use the internet without fear of abuse, criminality, or exposure to horrific content," the manifesto claims in a section called, quote, "The Safest Place to Be Online." Quote, "Our starting point is that online rules should reflect those that govern our lives offline," the Conservatives' manifesto says, explaining this justification for a new level of regulation. Quote, "It should be as unacceptable to bully online as in the playground, as difficult to groom a young child on the internet as it is in the community, as hard for children to access violent and degrading pornography online as it is in the high street, and as difficult to commit a crime digitally as it is physically." The Conservatives will also seek to regulate the kind of news that is posted online and how companies are paid for it. If elected, this is before the election is happening now, as you know, if elected, Theresa May will, quote, "take steps to protect the reliability and objectivity of information that is essential to our democracy and crack down on Facebook and Google to ensure that news companies get enough advertising money. If internet companies refuse to comply with the rulings, a suggestion that some have already made about the powers in the Investigatory Powers Act, then there will be a strict and strong set of ways to punish them. Quote, "We will introduce a sanctions regime to ensure compliance, giving regulators the ability to fine or prosecute those companies that fail in their legal duties, and to order the removal of content where it clearly breaches UK law," the manifesto reads. So, this is not just terrorism. Pornography is in there. Quote unquote hate speech, which is important to this Portland story because what is hate speech? Who determines what is hate speech? Fake news is clearly in here. They have the ability now to force providers to basically put out propaganda. And if you don't follow their laws, huge fines and sanctions.
Crazy.
Before the terrorist attacks. Before. And what is her solution? Isn't it interesting that her solution to the terrorist attacks is the exact same thing that she was pushing anyway? So basically, no solution to these individual terrorist attacks because it's not about that.
And there was nothing that pointed to, there was nothing, well, in the narrative that they crafted that pointed to them even using the internet to do harm or to cause harm or to be included in these.
Where's these guys' Facebook posts?
Exactly.
Where's their YouTube videos? We commented on that fact. If these guys are supposedly suicide bombers, where's their... You're telling me so far we've got 4 suicide attacks. Not one of them leaves a martyrdom video? Not one of them leaves a martyr video.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you brought up with Nathan's show too. Is they do it for that reason.
That's why they do it. They do it to be martyrs. That's the whole fucking point.
Yeah,
that's a misunderstanding that people have about that culture. The entire point of doing a suicide bombing is to be a martyr. The entire thing about a martyr is people have to know who you are. Where are their YouTube videos? Where are their notes to friends? Where are their Facebook postings? Where's fucking anything? Anything.
Wow.
Because they didn't think they were going to get killed. So, in terms of hate speech, I think this and good. So I'm glad we've got that covered. I'm glad that as the sort of follow-up to Manchester, for all those people who say this isn't about regulating the internet, and it should give you a little bit of pause. Problem, reaction, solution. If what you want to do, if your solution to some problem that comes out, if your reaction and solution to some problem comes out is what you wanted to do anyway, exactly what you were just talking about doing a few weeks before, and there's some weird things in the narrative, just might give you a little bit of pause. If you know for sure that at least the intelligence agencies, because that's the counterintelligence wing of the FBI, if law enforcement and intelligence agencies are creating hoaxes and you know they are, or recruiting patsies and you know they are, and then all the rest of the whole narrative is junk, just saying, man. Just saying.
Wow, this is a great addition to last week's show. Crazy.
So let's talk about Portland, because we see it over there with terrorism, but understand this exact same tool can be used. This is a collectivist tool, right? This is how collectivists work. And it's collectivists going against collectivists. When you look at it in this collectivist vein, when you're like, oh yeah, all Muslims X, all alt-right X. And what's funny is the alt-right are being collectivists about Muslims because of these fake terror attacks. See, all them Muslims, see what happens when you let in the Muslims? When it's pretty clear that it's MI5 doing all this. But no, it's the Muslims, right? While at the same time, it's fucking being used against them. Let's look at Portland. Let's just go through this Portland thing. This news number 2.
A Good Samaritan act gone horribly wrong. 2 men were killed by knife attack on a Portland train Friday after coming to the aid of 2 women who appeared to be Muslim. The quiet commute interrupted after a passenger began a tirade described by others on the train as nothing short of hate speech, yelling ethnic and religious slurs toward the 2 women, one of which was wearing a hijab. Things took a deadly turn when fellow passengers tried to intervene.
They were attacked viciously by the suspect.
1 man was pronounced dead at the scene. A 2nd man died at the hospital. A 3rd man, who was also stabbed, is expected to survive.
These were folks just riding the train and unfortunately, got caught up in this.
Officers arrested the suspect after he ran off the train. Friday evening marked the beginning of the holy Muslim month of Ramadan. In a tweet, the Council on American Islamic Relations calling on President Trump to denounce bigotry toward Muslims, putting the blame on the president for his focus on militant Islamist groups and his strong anti-immigrant rhetoric, which they say contributed to a 50% spike in hate crimes against Muslims last year.
Okay, so here we have the narrative as it started. Narrative starts as there's a guy on the train yelling hate speech at 2 girls, one of whom is wearing a hijab, yelling anti-Muslim hate speech in particular. Ends up 3 bystanders try to help. This is the narrative. 3 bystanders try to help. He stabs all 3 of them in the neck. 2 of them die. 1 of them survives. Cops catch him later. All right? The plot thickens. The plot thickens, and we'll go into that. So, from the beginning, this is being presented in Portland, which is a very liberal town, being presented as this is a hate crime committed by someone who's ideologically possessed, who's a Trump supporter, clearly, because they're blaming it on Trump. That's how it starts. We're going to skip Christian because I think a lot of people at this point know what the story is, and that's a good enough place to start, and a lot more has happened since then. We're going to skip to this Willamette thing because this was basically the beginning of this profile, them profiling this guy. This is actually what Washington Post used to reference to try to start talking about who this guy was. So you see this Willamette thing, let's talk about this. This is by, what is the dude's name here? Oh, we'll figure it out. The man accused of max double murder is a Portland white supremacist who delivered Nazi salutes and racial slurs at a free speech rally last month. I know because I interviewed him last month. This is from the Willamette Week. I shook the alleged killer's filthy hand 28 days ago. Mine feels tainted now, as though I somehow sanctioned his reported act, though I was only trying to get some information out of him. He had just marched through Montevilla Park, chanting nigger and throwing fascist salutes, wearing an American Revolutionary War flag like a cape. It was this act that sparked the first movement of chaos at the free speech rally on April 29th in Montevilla Park, which then proceeded down 82nd Avenue, a miserable replacement for a neighborhood parade canceled due to the threat of political violence. The man in the flag cape was quickly swarmed by scrawny young Antifa kids, then by officers from the Portland Police Bureau. After the scrum dispersed, I stood by watching while police searched his backpack. They seemed to know that, prior to the march, he had posted a Facebook message threatening to, quote, shoot to kill police if they attempt to disarm anyone openly carrying a firearm to the rally. Any guns in there, an officer asked. Just comic books, he said. He was a big fan. I think that guy is mentally ill, one of the officers confided. Almost certainly. Jeremy Joseph Christian, 35, who was arrested yesterday on suspicion of killing two men who tried to protect two dark-skinned women wearing hijabs, only one was wearing a hijab, from his racist abuse, is also a notorious racist from North Portland who networked with other racists when he wasn't doing time, and presumably when he was. The organizer of the march, Vancouver's Joey Gibson of the Patriot Prayer Group that has invited more racist and anti-Semitic speakers to a June 4th rally in downtown Portland, disavowed any association with Christian, but I got the distinct impression that Christian and his skittish friend had come to the rally with a larger crew. As we spoke on the curb, I saw them signal to a fat man with a shaved head who was driving a yellow pickup truck, flying a Blue Lives Matter flag off the back. The truck proceeded to circle the area as the right-wing marchers traded insults with Antifa while marching down the city's immigrant main street. Some reports will emphasize Christian's criminal record and his mental illness, just as early reports stress the random nature of the double murder he is alleged to have committed yesterday. But it would be negligent not to investigate the possibility that Christian committed a premeditated hate crime and that others may have known of his intention or encouraged him in the act. The targets of his hate may have been broad: Muslims, Jews, feminists, liberals, police. But there's no doubt Christian had announced his intention to kill. So this is where we start with this guy. Let's show pictures of this individual. We've got these protest pics. I think this might be a slide. Is this a slideshow? No. So this is the picture of him at that rally that this author was talking about. Take a look at him. This clearly does not look like the most sane individual. He's obviously putting on quite a show because he's got these people around him sort of looking at him. He's being a bit of a fool. All right, so this guy in this article says that he was clearly marching with these people. Well, there's video from the march. That's the thing. Let's see if he was marching with these people. Let's play this march video. So there's the march. There's the people marching. Oh, there he is. Is he marching?
This is the Portland Police Bureau. We respect your First Amendment right, speech and assembly, and are working to facilitate a safe environment to do so. By this announcement, the Police Bureau exercises its authority to place reasonable time,
so
place
these
and
are
manner
actually
restrictions
marchers,
on this
right? Very
event,
peaceful,
and require
not
the
doing
following.
anything, not saying anything,
Southeast
just marching.
82nd Avenue is open to vehicular traffic. Continue to use the sidewalks on Southeast 82nd Avenue. Participants who violate ORS 166.025, disorderly conduct of the second degree, or participate in other criminal conduct are subject to arrest. Continue walking south on Southeast 82nd. Do not
Here's
block
this.
side roads entering Southeast 82nd.
Who knows where he is at this point?
Persons
I
who
think
block
probably just went
roadways
right
are
past- I think he
subject
probably
to
stole that
citation
behind there.
or arrest.
You see that guy in the white helmet?
So I certainly don't. So that's
He
not
has
him.
swastikas on him, and he's doing Heil Hitler things.
I've been here since 9 a.m., so trust me. If
Put
it's,
up that good stuff, come on.
If it's happened, I've seen it.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know where he's at.
Hit each other. Say no to political violence.
Okay. So the question is he with them? Is he with them? Let's play this Instagram thing. Maybe we can get some answers of whether or not he's with them.
Die Muslim! Die fake Christian! Die
He
Jew!
doesn't belong here. He's not with us. Infiltrator. He's not giving us a bad name. Infiltrator.
Fucking fake ass. I'm a nihilist! He ain't shit with us!
So here we have the people who are actually at the march saying he's not with us. He doesn't belong here. He's not with us. But the narrative is, oh, he's with them. He's one of them. So this is the first place where it's strange. We're talking about, in the first place, we're talking about a guy who is clearly mentally ill, who's there at these rallies, who the people at the rallies are saying, he's not with us, he's not with us. Then something very strange happened. Middle of the week, police make an announcement. You have this theft. They say that one of the people who was killed, Ricky Best, that his backpack and wedding ring, after he was stabbed, as he's laying there dying, that someone comes and steals his backpack and his wedding ring. And that they have video of this suspect. Why don't we show this theft vid? So this is the train. Oh, is that slow-mo? Did you do slow, or which one did you do?
That's
Okay, well we'll just show this. It's in a little bit of slow motion. Watch this guy. They're saying he comes out of the train. He's got 2 backpacks. Now he walks over here, weirdly enough, talks to somebody, hands them one of the backpacks. One of those is supposed to be Ricky Best. Looks, walks away, and they say, "This is the guy we're looking for." Show it again. Show that. Just play that again. Very weird. So this is the guy that supposedly stole wedding ring from, I don't know how you steal a wedding ring from somebody who's laying there dying. He walks out with 2 black backpacks. Supposedly his Ricky Best is in the right hand. Then he takes with the left hand, talks to somebody right there, off camera, conveniently, right off camera, then hands them the backpack, clearly. Then looks, then takes off. Very weird, Christian. It's very, very, very strange. So this guy steals a backpack and supposedly steals a wedding ring off one of the people who's laying there dying. His family said it contained items that were important to the family. That's what was reported. Contains items important to the family. Now, first, how you get a wedding ring off somebody.
right.
And then this guy comes out with 2 backpacks. And clearly, it's clear that he talks to somebody and hands one of them the backpack. This is never mentioned by the police. And then they capture the guy. You got this captured thing? So this is suspect arrested in theft of Portland victim's wedding ring and backpack. So police arrested a man Friday, the theft of a wedding band and backpack that belonged to Ricky Vest, the Army veteran stabbed to death on a commuter train last week in Portland, Oregon, police spokesman Sergeant Pete Simpson said. George Shigany, 51, was wearing Best's ring when he was arrested at a small homeless camp under a Portland overpass, Simpson said. So, Christian, this guy goes, he steals a wedding ring, gives away the backpack. He's a homeless guy. And then he's wearing the wedding ring. He doesn't pawn it. He doesn't sell it. Now, I'm from a not so good area. I've been around some pretty shady characters in my life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. A homeless guy who's got enough wherewithal to steal a ring off a dying man's finger does not steal it so that he could wear it. He steals it so that he can pawn it. But this guy didn't pawn it. He's caught actually with the wedding ring.
Strange.
Not the backpack, though. Because, of course, the homeless have no need for backpacks. They only have need for wedding rings that aren't theirs. Didn't catch him with the backpack. Didn't catch him with the backpack. Or any of the things in the backpack. Just caught him with the wedding ring inside. Totally legit. Right? Totally legit. So this is just a little interesting piece, and I think that we can get through this before we bring on G. Edward Griffin. So this started to bring up to me, this is a very strange sort of situation, right? Throw the stabbed thing up. When they arrested Jeremy Joseph Christian, right? It says, after his arrest, Jeremy Joseph Christian sat in the back of the police car and said, "I stabbed the two expletives in the neck and I'm happy now." The police car, equipped with audio and video recording devices, captured statements from Christian, a suspect in the stabbing deaths of two people on the Portland Light Rail. So, these captured tapes, right after the event, he specifically says that he stabbed two people in the neck, and I'm happy now. But 3 people were stabbed in the neck. 3 people were stabbed in the neck. One of those people had some things stolen from him after he was stabbed in the neck. And who is that person? Like, I'm sure he's just some random, right? There couldn't possibly be anything suspicious about who this particular person is. Right? Couldn't possibly be. Right? To have something, to be conveniently stabbed when this guy says he only stabbed 2 people, to be a third person, and you have something which is the fucking weirdest. You see a dude bleeding on the ground and you grab his backpack and then pull his wedding ring off while he's stabbed in the neck? Unless maybe you stabbed him in the neck to take his shit. But let's see, who is he? Who is Ricky Best? Who is he? Best was, this is from BuzzFeed. Best was a city employee, Army veteran, and father of 4, according to the Oregonian. He served 23 years in the military as a platoon sergeant for Corps Maintenance, retiring in 2012. In 2014, he made an unsuccessful attempt to run for Clackamas County Commissioner. I can't stand by and do nothing, Best said of his decision to run for local politics, according to the Oregonian's profile on his candidacy. At the time of his death, he was working as a supervisor in Portland's Bureau of Development Services. So what is the Portland Bureau of Development Services? Well, the Portland Bureau of Development Services gives all the permitting for new construction, for rezoning, for land use. So if you want to build a new hotel, you got to go through them. If you want to build a new, new house, you go through the development services. If you want to build a new road, lay some train tracks down, do all of these things, right? Particularly coming from LA, I know that developers in general are very powerful and are often accused of graft and corruption and all of that. I mean, that was the whole thing with the Atlantic City controversy, right? It's all about what happens on this development board. So, you've got a guy working for the development board who happens to be one of the people killed. He's got something stolen from him. Let's see a little more about this guy. Go with the campaign. Retired Happy Valley Army mechanic, not accepting donations in his race against Clackamas Commissioner Paul Savas. Rick Best will not be beholden to anyone if he's elected a Clackamas County Commissioner. That's his campaign promise, backed by the fact he is not accepting campaign donations. He repeatedly stresses that he stands by his moral convictions no matter what, and acknowledges that might hurt his chances to actually win the seat currently held by Paul Savas. He was running in 2014 for county commissioner. Best retired from the United States Army as a platoon sergeant for Corps maintenance in 2012 after 23 years in the military. He joined his family in Happy Valley and quickly became fed up with the county board. He didn't like the board paying TriMet for Portland-Milwaukee light rail when voters said no. The commissioners were forced by the Clackamas County Circuit Court to comply with the contractual agreement. Best didn't think the commissioners should have given themselves pay raises in the last budget cycle. Interestingly, his opponent, incumbent Savas, was the only commissioner to vote against the raises, which the other commissioners voted for because their raises were tied to raises for other county elected officials. He is also against raising revenue through a tax to pay to repair roads, as the board is debating currently. So a friend suggested that Best run for the board instead of just complaining about the issues. He knew 2 seats were up for election and thought both Savas and Clackamas County Commissioner Jim Bernard both had good and bad positions, so he flipped a coin to decide who to run against. Quote, "I can't stand by and do nothing," Best said. He now works this is in 2014. He now works as an electronics repairman. He loves the job because he can spend time with his kids, who he didn't get to see as often as he'd like while serving. Best points out he's not a career politician. He's not interested in starting with an elected position to a smaller board or council and then moving up. He wants to make change, and that starts with his campaign. Quote, "No one can say I'm in it for the money because I don't want it," quote, Best said. So, what do you have? You have a guy who is a proven opponent of government corruption, particularly in the local government, who runs for county commission. Then he decides he's going to go and get a job at in the development board or in the development department. He's a manager actually over there. He's working for the city. This is a guy who's against government corruption, working for the city, carrying a backpack with information that's important to his family, who just so winds up getting stabbed in the neck on a train and having that backpack stolen and not recovered. And a homeless man arrested wearing his wedding ring. I'm just saying, that's just a little strange part.
Very fishy.
Little strange part.
Yeah.
But this thing shook out quite a bit further. So go ahead and show this prediction thing. So right when this whole thing happened, I tweeted, "I'm worried about how the authoritarian left is going to use this Portland Mac stabbing, the act of a psychopath, to limit free speech." And as usually happens with the Vinstradamus predictions, let's see what the mayor's response to it.
For Shrunk Plaza, and it's my understanding that they have issued a permit for June 4th. I'm calling on the federal government to immediately revoke any permit or permits that they've issued for the June 4th event, and I'm asking them not to issue a permit for the June 10th event. Our city is in mourning. Our community's anger is very real, and the timing and subject of these events can only exacerbate what is already a very difficult situation. I'm appealing to the organizers of the alt-right events to cancel the events that they've scheduled on both June 4th and June 10th. I urge them to ask their supporters to stay away from Portland at this difficult time. There is never a place for bigotry or hatred in our community, and especially not.
What? You lose it? Aha. So, Christian, I'm a little worried about the authoritarian left trying to stifle free speech. There's a literally called a free speech rally scheduled on federal property that's already permitted, and the mayor comes out, "I am urging the federal government to pull the permit on this free speech rally."
Jesus. Yeah.
So the free speech rally happens. It actually happened yesterday. Let's hear a few beginning words from the organizers. Since this was going to be a problem, the free speech, let's hear some beginning words from the organizer.
We're just going to spew out hate speech. Mayor Wheeler says that I spew out hate speech, okay? We got to prove them wrong. We got to prove them wrong. So I'm calling on everybody. I'm calling on the anarchists, the communists, the Hillary supporters back there, whoever you may be, the union people back here, everyone in here. I'm calling on everyone to please do everything you can to be positive. I want to tell you a quick story, okay?
So, do everything you can to be positive. The organizer of the free speech rally is calling for peace. He calls for peace. Now, there are counter-protests. Now remember, the mayor doesn't want the alt-right events to happen. There are other people who don't want the alt-right events to happen. They organize counter-protests. Now, they don't have a permit for those counter-protests. They are just organizing counter-protests. The alt-right people have a permit. They have a permit on federal property. It's a federal permit. It has nothing to do with the city. The others, they jump onto the city property. So let's see this result. This is from KGW.com. At about 3:30 p.m., police announced the south side of Chapman Square, which had been designated for an Antifa group to gather, was closed. Officers started to use impact weapons and chemical munitions after protesters began throwing objects. Shortly after, police said all of Chapman Square had been closed. Protesters threw bricks, mortars, and balloons filled with, quote, unknown foul-smelling liquid, according to police. They said only the protesters at Chapman Square had engaged in criminal behavior. The crowds at Terry Shrunk Plaza, where a pro-Donald Trump free speech rally was held, and City Hall, where the Portland Stands United Against Hate rally took place, were not involved. Police pushed a crowd of protesters from Chapman Square to Lonsdale Square, where they continued to throw objects at officers, police said. The suspects would be arrested if and when possible. So, and there's the person from KGW, the NBC affiliate there, said, wow, Antifa demonstrators stole a flag from an apparent real Donald Trump supporter, nearly knocked me and my photographer down. See, there she is, stealing. Those peaceful, because the Trump supporters, they're so violent, Christian. They're so hateful. Except none of the violence came from them.
Mm-hmm.
They're hateful people. We can't allow them. The city needs to heal. Shut them down. Shut them down. And Antifa went to do what he said. Let's see, the police were posting throughout the day some of the weapons that they pulled up. Items collected from Southwest Madison Street, 3rd and 4th Avenues between Terry Shrunk Plaza and Chapman Square.
Wow.
Bricks, which were being thrown at the police. An Antifa banner. Oh, lovely. This is a slideshow. Let's show the next one.
Wow.
There's another collection of weapons seized. I see a lot of black. See a lot of pink. There's some more bricks. Let's go more. Unidentified suspects on roof of Chapman Square bathroom. Bag of bricks located, possibly taken from the building. Antifa. Look at the black mask. Look at the bricks. Oh, and an Antifa banner down there in the corner. That black and red. Gotta love it. We got next. Oh, there's some more. Black and red.
Wow.
How about some more? Oh, and there we go. With her George Bush is the devil. That's where the violence was coming from. That's who was getting arrested. That's who was assaulting police. The people who wanted to shut down the Donald Trump free speech rally. Well, the mayor wanted to shut down the Donald Trump free speech rally. The mayor tried to get the federal government to do it. So, this is where we stand, and we're coming up on 11, which is great. So here's the thing. This event where people died, first off, really very strange situation with a violent individual who was obviously crazy, who we could see, who clearly this group over here said he is not with us. He's not a part of this. He's not with us. He commits an act. Immediately, it's blamed on the people who said he's not with us. We can't have a rally. We can't. We need to shut them down because they're violent. Then they have their rally. And they're completely nonviolent. But the people that want to shut them down are violent. So, good call. This is why it's important that people wake up. This is why it's important. Because they want to shut down the internet. Shutting down the internet is shutting down free speech.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing.
Burning the books.
It's burning the books. It's controlling your access to information. That's what they want. It's Orwellian.
Wow.
It's the theory and practice of oligarchical collectivism, which is the book inside the book of 1984. This is what they do. And it's not like history isn't full of these staged events. Mm-hmm. Problem, reaction, solution. It's part and parcel of what they do, and it works. It works to gain more control. If it didn't work, they wouldn't do it. And clearly you see what they want to do. You see what the collectivists want to do. They want to shut it down. And they don't want to shut it down because they're peaceful people afraid of violence. They're violent people willing to use violent coercion against others. So when violence occurs, you need to look in the direction of the people who are historically violent. Mm-hmm. That's not coming from the people who want free speech. That's not coming from the people in the alternative news media. That's not coming from the porn industry. It's about individuals. It's about understanding that you own yourself, you own your body, you own your mind, you own your sensations. Those belong to you. They're nobody else's, and don't hand them over. I think that's a great place for us to. We're going to talk about this because G. Edward Griffin can really get into this. I'm fired up. I'm ready for this. Why don't you pull him on, get him, and we will go to break, and then we will come back with the eminent author and philosopher G. Edward Griffin. Let's go to break. Go ahead and talk. Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. Also on Twitter and Periscope at Vin Armani is my handle there. Also, we are streaming live on the Facebook page of our content partner, Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. Before we jump into this interview, just want to give a quick reminder about counter markets. For those people who are subscribers, the June issue is shipping today, and it's awesome. There's great advice in there, a great article about safe and legal ways to avoid taxes. I did an article about cryptocurrency tokens and which industries it's going to affect first. And I think that this month especially is one to start investing in the token. Swarm City, actually, who we've interviewed their communications people about, June 15th is the big day for that. I think that's really going to be a groundbreaking product. I've obviously been pushing it for quite some time. If you are not a subscriber and you would like to check it out, you can still go and get the May issue, which is fantastic as well. You can get it for free by going to countermarkets.com and just signing up. No strings attached. You're going to get it 100% free. We know you'll love it, so we know you're going to subscribe. Also, just want to tell you, giant discounts still going on if you buy with cryptocurrency. So if you're going to get it, I would say get it now. Cryptocurrency is on its way up. It's a great excuse to go out and get yourself a Bitcoin wallet, or we take Ethereum, we take Dash, we take Ripple, we take Litecoin. So any one of those you can pay, you'll get a massive discount, and the advice that you get by itself on precious metals and cryptocurrency, it's going to pay for the subscription with the first month that you've got it. So Would love to have you on countermarkets.com. And with that, I will go over to our interview, which I'm very excited about today. So Christian, if you will introduce G. Edward Griffin. G. Edward Griffin is a writer, documentary film producer, and founder of Freedom Force International. He's best known as the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. He has dealt with such diverse subjects as archaeology and ancient Earth history, the Federal Reserve System and international banking, terrorism, internal subversion, the history of taxation, U.S. foreign policy, the science and politics of countertherapy, the Supreme Court, and the United Nations. On June 23rd and 24th in Bozeman, Montana, he will be hosting the Red Pill Expo, an event featuring such consciousness-expanding speakers as Robert Kiyosaki, Mike Adams, James Corbett, and Jeff Berwick. G. Edward Griffin, welcome to the Vin Armani Show. Excited to have you on.
Well, thank you very much. It's a delight to be here.
So most people, myself included, know you because you were the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, which I think woke a lot of people up and is the go-to tome when it comes to the Federal Reserve. But most recently, and what I hope we can talk about today, is I found it intriguing, the work that you've been doing with Freedom Force International, specifically in addressing the difference between collectivism and individualism. I'm seeing a lot more people talk about those differences. Obviously, as far back as Orwell, right? The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism is the little book inside 1984. A lot of people don't understand what exactly that means, but it's crucial. Maybe if you could tell us how you decided to sort of take this on, why this became something that was important to you, and then if maybe you could help us by starting to make some clear definitions about what is collectivism, what's the difference between collectivism and individualism?
That's one of my favorite topics, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And in order to answer your question, Vin, I think it's probably a good idea to tell you a little bit about my story, about how I became aware of this. It didn't happen overnight. I'll try and make this short. I don't want to bore you with a long
please,
dissertation.
Let's go.
Well, good. So what I probably do would bore you with a shorter one. No, the story is very simple. That I became aware of what was going on in the world. I knew something was wrong. Became aware in about 1959. And by 1960, I was in full gallop. I wanted to do something about it. And back in those days, maybe a lot of your listeners weren't around in 1960, but the big bugaboo in the world scene was communism. And I was very much into that. I mean, not into communism, but into combating communism and making sure that it didn't take over this country like it was taking over half of the world back in those days. It was galloping like around the planet. China, and even Cuba, and everywhere you looked, the countries were falling to communism. And so I felt that, hey, this is pretty serious stuff. So I became kind of a quasi theoretician about communism. I even went so far as to go down to the communist bookstore in Los Angeles and hang out down there. Hung out with the comrades and tried to pick their brains. They thought I was a real genuine recruit. They didn't know that I was just there to find out what was going on, what their message was, how they worked, and how much of a real danger was it, or was it just a bunch of nonsense? So I enrolled in all their study classes. I went to their recruiting sessions. They tried to sign me up, and I kept putting it off. But the point is that I read a lot of communist literature. I became kind of a student of Marx and Lenin. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people have read, Das Kapital and Communist Manifesto, but they haven't read the works of Lenin. He's a very vociferous orator and writer. And I really got imbued with all the rhetoric of communism. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Let us unite against war and racism, and all the slogans, which were so good. The slogans are good, nothing wrong with them. But when you analyze them and see what they really mean, you suddenly realize that, oh, wait a minute, this is more like a trap than anything else. And then for some reason, I became interested in the other, what people in those days thought was the opposite of communism, which was Nazism or fascism. So I started to read about that. I picked up all the literature I could find, starting with, of course, Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. And I got deeply into that too, and somewhere along that path, then, it dawned on me that these two groups were exactly the same. They believed the same thing underneath all the insignia. One had a hammer and sickle, the other one had a swastika. Okay, one wore, a different uniform than the other, the military did. One group was a devotee of socialism. The Nazis were, the Nazis, Nazi stands for German version of National Socialist Party. The Nazis were socialists. The communists were socialists, except the Nazis were National Socialists. The communists were International Socialists. Big deal. And everywhere I looked, I began to peel off the label and look beneath. I said, my gosh, these people believe exactly the same. And that opened my eyes. And it didn't take, I should say it took quite a while before that sunk in. And it didn't really hit me till probably about 1990. That we were building in America, in the name of fighting communism and in the name of fighting Nazism, we were building the same thing under a different name. We were calling it, we had different names for it. Different presidents came to power. One called it the New Deal. The other one called it the Great Society. Slogans were put on it. Today, they're calling it social justice. And all of a sudden, I realized back in the 90s that all of these movements, we were being asked to choose one that we liked. Were we communists, fascists, Nazis, socialists, left-wing, right-wing, Republicans, Democrats, given all of these apparent options. But when you peel off the labels and looked at what the leaders of these groups believe, they believe the same thing. So I became curious, what is that same thing? And it wasn't difficult to find. It's in the literature, The people have written about this for a long, long time. It's called collectivism. You go back 80 years, 100 years, and the literature on social movements and political movements is very clear. It's loaded with this word collectivism. And the opposite of collectivism is individualism. But once I began to read about this topic in terms of the old literature, I realized that we had lost something. Starting about World War I, by the end of World War II, those words, collectivism versus individualism, were gone. They were not popular. The political leaders of the world did not want people using those words because they were too descriptive. They really said something. They really meant something. What they meant is that underneath all of these different ideologies, there was this group of people who were the collectivists, that as the word sort of suggests, they believe that the collective is the center of society. They believe that the group is more important than the individual. See, the individualists believe that individuals are the center of society. That's the individual humans are the essence of any system. Whereas the collectivists believe that the humans, the individuals, must be sacrificed, if necessary, for the greater good of the greater number. And I was taught that in school, and it sounded like a good idea in those days because I associated it with this word called democracy. There's another one of those words that needs to be redefined. Democracy means the greater good of the greater number. It means majority rule. It's all about numbers, you see. It's about collectives. It's about groups. It has nothing to do with the individual. So that's where it all started. It was a gradual awareness that we were being divided. When I say we, I'm talking not just about Americans, but in just about every country in the world, especially in the Western world. People were being asked to choose up sides. Well, as former President Bush said, you're either for us or against us. That's your choice. Which side are you on? You're either a Democrat or you're a Republican. Who are you voting for? Don't talk to me about anything else. Democrat or Republican, that's it. Well, wait a minute. Some Democrats and some Republicans I like. Some Democrats and some Republicans I don't like. Not important. Who are you for? You got to choose up sides. Left, are you on the left or are you on the right? Are these really opposites or not? So forth. Okay, you get my point. Once you peel off the label of all of these movements and look underneath, at least now I'm talking about the Western world. We can come back later if you wish and talk about theocracies, which still exist in a large part of the world, as you know. And that's got nothing to do with left or right or any of this collectivism or individualism. It's a whole different animal. It has to do with God is ruling us, and this human being is a representative of God. So we obey the human being because to do that is to obey God. That's a theocracy, more or less. And they still exist. But now in the Western world, in our world, this is not present. What we are dealing with is this conflict between individualism and collectivism. So I've made it my crusade for quite a while to quit talking about socialism and capitalism and communism and Nazism and left and right, and Republicans and Democrats and conservatives and liberals, and, neoconservatives and moderates and all these words that mean nothing. And I have been crusading to get people to think about the essence of collectivism and individualism. And I'm happy to say that probably it's not my efforts, it's the efforts of a lot of people who have probably come to the same awareness and have decided to stop using those old garbage words, start using real words that mean something. I'm happy to say that more and more in the debate on the internet, even on television now, I'm hearing people say on television, on the so-called mainstream media, and they're using words like, well, collectivism is on a roll or something like that. And I think, did I hear this guy right? He's actually using the right word. So we're gaining strength on that. And if we can keep that ball rolling, I think we're going to be very happy, because now let's get to the essence.
Yes, please.
The words describe something important. And what it describes is a political ideology. And what we believe is what we do, and our actions are based on our beliefs. And if we have a political ideology, a belief system that teaches us that it's correct for the group to be more important than the individual and to sacrifice the individual for the group, we have made a huge mistake. And indeed, the world has made that very mistake, because most of the world now embraces collectivism in one form or another. They don't know that it has a name. They probably have never studied its component parts, but they embrace it. And as long as the people of the world embrace that concept, they're going to continue down that slippery slope into totalitarianism. Democratic dictatorships are what they're going to be. In fact, we've already got them in most of the world. They're going to be in love with the idea that the group, always led by a great leader, of course, the leader speaks for the group, he says, and his party, they say, they speak for the group, they speak for the people. And that's the word you hear increasingly now, the people, the people. The communist bookstore that I used to go to in Los Angeles was called the People's Bookshop. So that's the slogan, that's how they kind of get you into it, the people. So, but there's always, under that concept, there's always one person who is the strong man, the leader, Right. 1984, you've got the great leader up on the screen, right. Big Brother. Well, in every collectivist system, you've got that strong, powerful leader. You've got Lenin, you've got Stalin, you've got Obama, you've got the great leader. Now we've got Trump. Everybody likes Trump partly because he's a great leader, you see. Right. Even though they're fighting against the components of collectivism, they still embrace other components because they don't realize it's all part of a pattern. The pattern of a great leader representing the people and defending the people is so ingrained in us that it's going to take a little while to get a good look at that and say that, no, we don't want a great leader, because the leader always, eventually becomes a tyrant. We give him the power, and that power will corrupt everyone. And if it doesn't corrupt some people, they're not in power forever, and they die, or they're elected out, and rotate in. Here comes another guy, and he inherits this power we gave to this former great leader because we liked him. But now we got some guy we don't like, but he's got the power we gave to the guy we do like. And so it's just a process of time. And when you give great power to these great leaders, sooner or later you're going to have a great tyrant on your hands. These are some of the things that come out of this discussion. What is collectivism versus individualism? I don't know how deeply you want to go into that, Vin, but
Yeah,
I just mentioned one.
Let's do it. Well, I mean, one of the things that I found interesting, and it's something that occurred to me sort of independently, and then when I heard you talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. And I think you just touched on it there when you were talking about this idea of the great leader and speaking for the people, is that one of the, it seems, and you talk about this quite a bit, and I'd love if you could expand on it, that one of the big hallmarks of collectivism is this great fiction, right? That nested inside of collectivism are these sort of fictional entities, these fictional, I don't know if you, I mean, they're groups, but it's almost giving an identity and a soul to an entity that doesn't even exist. Whereas obviously individuals have individual identities and souls, if you want to call it that, but we certainly have our own self-interest. I'd love if you could talk about, clearly we see the self-interest of the great leader being manifested, right? In the Stalins and the Obamas and the Trumps. Why is it that people are able to assign, though, this fiction as though, oh no, this is actually the will of the collective, it's not the will of the individual? How do we get to that place? Because it seems like it should be obvious that it's a fiction.
It should be obvious, but the other part of the obvious part is that obviously it's not viewed that way by most people. It kind of reminds me of Plato's works. He spoke, I think he called it the honorable lie or something like that. In other words, as far back as Plato, they were discussing things like this. And he said that sometimes in order to hold society together, to keep people in line, to prevent revolutions and the overthrowing of the order, in other words, to keep society under, he didn't say it, but it meant that keep society under control with a lot of violence, to keep the ruling class in place, in other words. It's sometimes necessary to create fictions, deliberate fictions that sound good and make people feel good about their condition. And we see that happening all the time. We look around us. In fact, this is one of the reasons we're having this Red Pill Expo coming up very shortly in Bozeman, because the Red Pill is all about breaking free of the illusion and seeing reality as it really is. And we have these illusions all around us. And the more important aspects of our life seem to have the most deeply ingrained illusions. Now, I'm not going to try and insult anybody, but we have illusions about, we have illusions about our system, our political system. I know when I was a kid, I was taught that in this great country of ours, which it was, but because it was a great country and because it was founded on the principles of liberty and all of that, which it was, but because of that origin, we still today have all of those things in place, which we don't. But the illusion was that we did. And every 4th of July, we salute the flag. We have flags everywhere. We play patriotic music. We cite the allegiance to the flag. That's an interesting concept in itself. Allegiance to a flag? Well, to the republic for which it stands. Okay, that clarifies a little bit. But the idea is that people tend to have allegiances to flags or to names like a nation, a name of a nation, rather than the principles of a nation. We're born to think that we should, depending on what country we're born into, we think we should be loyal, patriotic citizens of that country, no matter what. We hear it said, my country, right or wrong, but my country. Well, we used to think that was a good idea, but then we go back and re-examine that right or wrong part. What? We should support something right or wrong? Or wrong? Well, now we have to start thinking, is that really what we want to do? Patriotism is based on the concept of supporting your country, right, but especially wrong. That's when patriotism seems to be most valuable, is that you need to support your country. Well, what does country mean? That's another word for group, isn't it? We're back to that, collectivism. Support your group. It's your tribe. It's your group, your collective. And you support it right or wrong because you are a part of it. And if you break away from it, then you're damaging everybody else somehow. That's the collectivist mantra. So back to that. We have these illusions everywhere. We have them in our political system, our country, in our religions, many of them. People have this strong emotional attachment to a religion, and they think that their preachers and their ministers and their priests are holy people. Yeah. Well, maybe some of them are, and maybe some of them aren't. Maybe there are some people who are not preachers, ministers, and priests who are far more holy than that. But the illusion is that if you put a collar on, it's a white collar or something, or you wear a black robe, or you put on a big robe when you give a sermon or something, you go into a church which is all beautifully decorated with images of saints or spiritual figures, that somehow this makes it correct. It's an illusion. You go into a courtroom. Well, now let's see, this is a very important place. Something's going to be decided in here, and it might affect you very, very profoundly. So when you walk in the courtroom, it's not just a room with plastered walls. It's got very fine paneling on it and drapes. It's got sound deadening acoustics. It's got very elaborate lights. And the judge's platform is up high in the air. He's above everybody else. And he walks in with this robe on. He's different. He's not a human anymore. He's an authority figure. And the bailiff or somebody says, "Rise," and everybody stands up. You see, this is all part of the tradition that reinforces an illusion. And the illusion is that somehow what's going to happen in that courtroom is almost godlike. It's beyond human understanding. It's an authority. It's coming somehow from out there. It's probably coming from God, this sort of thing. And everywhere we look, that's the point. Everywhere we look, we have all of these illusions. And many of them are exactly what Plato said they should be. They are honorable lies. Honorable in the sense of the authorities who tell the lies to keep the system together. Machiavelli had a similar idea when he wrote his book, The Prince. His advice to the prince was, in order to keep society together, to keep people comfortable with the yoke of your control over them, Prince, a good idea is to always be involved in a war or a threat of a war from some foreign enemy, some fearful external force. Because as long as people are afraid of their safety, they will accept all kinds of insults to their liberty. And as long as you, the prince he's talking to, as long as you, Prince, are seen as a representative of the nation or the people, then they will have to support you no matter what if they want to survive. So again, the illusion oftentimes of a great enemy over there somewhere. Sometimes enemies are real, but sometimes they're deliberately helped by the side which they are opposing, because it's valuable to have a credible enemy. And this is very much real in the world today. And I'm just going to say it out front. I know it's a controversial statement, but I think it can be well substantiated, that primarily the threat of terrorism today, international terrorism, has been created by people and institutions that benefit from fighting terrorism.
We agree with you on that one here, 100%. 100%.
Now that doesn't mean, but that doesn't mean the terrorists aren't a threat.
Right.
That doesn't mean you can ignore it. No,
right.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying dig down, find out who put them there, who's financing them, who's training them, who's making it possible for them to succeed, who's standing down so that we don't hit too hard against them. See? Now we're back to 1984 again. It was perpetual war, wasn't it? Right. There was always a war going on. People were fearful, so they needed their government, they needed their leaders, and they put up with all kinds of insults in order to secure their safety. Okay, having said that, how does that fit to collectivism?
Yes, please.
It's part of the trick. The collective has to be kept in line, and they have to be convinced that it's for their own good to accept all of the outrages that they have to endure as the collective. And that's just one of the characteristics of the game, that's all.
So I think that's a great, because it sounds like what you're describing. I mean, that is the metaphor of the Matrix. All of this, isn't it? I mean, that is the Matrix, and so I think it's very appropriate that we're talking about red pill, blue pill. I just think it's a great segue to talk about this expo, because I'm interested in knowing more about it as well. It's June 23rd and 24th in Bozeman, Montana. You've got a great lineup of speakers. I mean, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you decided to do this? Why Montana? I think a lot of people are going to be curious about that. And also, what was your sort of mindset when you went about curating this sort of all-star cast of speakers? I mean, we can tell where you're coming from, sort of, I don't want to use the term ideology, but where you're coming from philosophically. So if you could talk with us a little bit about what people could expect and sort of where your mind was at in terms of picking this lineup.
I have to rewind a little bit to see where I was at that point, but I know in general, one of the challenges that we have, and when I say that word this time, I mean those of us who have been trying to fight against and dismantle collectivism. One of the challenges we have had is that there are so many groups among us, and we're sort of splintered. We can't seem to get together. And one of the cries always is, come on, we got to get together. Let's all get into one big organization and strength and unity and all of that, which is true. Strength is unity. But it was always a bad idea to try and get together in one big organization, I thought. Besides, I'd been around long enough to see that those attempts always fail. They always fail because, believe it or not, people are still individualists.
Right.
And they have individual, very unique ideas about how to go about things. They have unique ideas about strategy and tactics, and they have unique ideas about structure and issues and so forth. So, you talk about trying to herd cats, try to herd a bunch of individualists together, and you really have an impossible mission. So I knew it didn't work, but it didn't seem like a good idea because it seemed like it was contrary to the principles of individualism. And then it finally dawned on me as I began to study the tactics that were used by our opponents that, let me define who our opponents are in this case. I began to study the tactics of what I consider to be the most successful components of the collectivist movement in the world. I already knew a lot about the Communist Party and the Nazi Party, but I had a lot yet to learn about American politics and American organizations. But when I finally put that into my radar and dug down into that, I discovered that it was pretty much the same as the Nazis and the communists. And I'm talking about the Council on Foreign Relations, which is, many people refer to it as the hidden government of the United States. I think it's a pretty apt description. There's a group of about 3,000, 4,000 people. That's all. A lot of churches in America have bigger memberships than that. And yet, these 3,000 or 4,000 people really run the United States. They're the power behind the throne, so to speak. You look at all the important positions in the United States, everything from politics, presidents of the United States, secretaries of state, generals of the army, CIA directors, Supreme Court justices, senators, congressmen, heads of committees, heads of networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, Turner Broadcasting, Fox News, CNN. Look at the heads of great universities, great tax-exempt foundations, labor unions, Life magazine, Time magazine, New York Times, Washington Post, etc. All of the power centers of society that really determine public policy in this nation. You'd be surprised what percentage of them are dominated by members of the Council on Foreign Relations. I'll give you a percentage figure. You say, well, what percentage?
Yeah.
I'd have to do my calculations again, but I'm going to say in excess of 70%.
Oh, wow.
And I feel very comfortable with that number. It's probably higher. So here's a strategy. Now, this didn't happen just because, just because the dart happened to hit that number. It happened because there's a strategy behind it. And the strategy is that people, the collective, are always led by a very small group of people. The 1% will easily lead 99% if they organize themselves into influential organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, like the Trilateralist Group, Commission, or like the Bilderberger Group. These are little tiny groups, way less than 1% of the population. But you look at the members of these groups, and they're the power brokers in society. They're the power behind the throne. They're the great banking dynasties. They're the ones that control the money, that control the media. If you control the money and you control the media, you can control the politicians. And if you can control the politicians, you can control the government. And if you can control the government, you can control the people. Right. So that's how 1% of the population controls the people. Seemingly an impossible task, but actually quite an easy task once you get this hierarchical structure in mind. So we see how, and the Communist Party did the same thing, the fascists did the same thing. They always spoke for the people. There's always that little 1% that were manipulating behind the scenes and capturing control of these power centers that influence public policy. So it occurred to me that that's how our enemies have done it. And now they didn't all get together in one organization. I've never seen, and I will never see, the Council on Foreign Relations out picketing someplace with a sign. You know, these people are too big for that. These are the strategists. These are the financiers. These are the ones that hire these poor saps with the picket signs. They're the ones that pay for the buses that deliver them. They're the ones who hire their leaders. They're the ones that pay for their lunch. They're the ones who give them, you know, $100 a day or whatever it is to get them out there. They're the ones that supply them with the dope. They're the ones that do what teach them in school, actually, what to think. Sure. Give them the trigger phrases and the slogans. So it's that 1%, and they control the movement of the nation or the world because of this hierarchical structure through the power centers. So now, that's our model. And it was with that in mind that I said we need some mechanism to create that kind of a structure. And we need to bring together all of these diverse groups, each with their special interests. Some are interested in stopping aggressive wars. Some are interested in having freedom of choice in healthcare. Some are interested in what's being taught in schools, on and on. And there's so many important factors. Taxation is another one, you know. The environmental issues and all of these things. Everybody's got their favorite little category that they fight in. We can't expect them to drop that and come and join with us and all go in lockstep. And in fact, we don't want to do that. There's power in diversity. If, now there's the big word, if all of these groups could come to understand that their common enemy is this thing called collectivism, and their common salvation is this thing called individualism, then wouldn't that sort of indirectly create a unified movement? It would provide an ideological umbrella over the whole movement, and it would benefit from the diversity of all of these groups, the diversity in their style, their culture, their issues, as long as they all understood that the enemy was collectivism and it had to be replaced by individualism. Then, for the first time in history, we would have a movement comparable to one of these other movements that I'd spent my life studying on the collectivist side. It seemed like all of the collectivist leaders understood this instinctively. But those of us who were fighting for our liberty and for our freedom never thought it through. We didn't have this motivation to think about, well, how do you control society and all that kind of thing. So we were reacting. They were acting and we were reacting. Right. And all we could do is say, well, we don't like what they're doing. We know what we don't want, but not 1 in 1,000 of the people I was working with could tell you what they wanted. They said, well, it's the Constitution. Oh, okay, the Constitution. What is there about the Constitution that's so great?
Just the Bill of Rights.
Well,
just the Bill of Rights, that's it.
The Bill of Rights, yeah. And even that, you know, what's so good about that? Why is that good?
Right.
And are there exceptions? In other words, there was no scholarship.
Right.
We were just reacting, and we had these slogans. The Constitution, United States of America, freedom, liberty, but nobody could define it.
Right.
So we were at a terrible, terrible disadvantage against our opponents who were really theoreticians. They were ready to debate these issues at the drop of a hat, and we looked silly. So now, why are we doing Red Pill?
Yes.
We think that the Red Pill is the first step to the creation of this movement, this umbrella, the ideological gyroscope that can weld together all of these diverse, strong, colorful elements of a freedom movement and give it strength through unity for the first time in history. And that's going to happen. If I have anything to do with it, it's going to happen. And it's going to start in Bozeman on June 23rd.
I love it. This is, it's something that has been, I love that you're addressing the fact that we have been reactive for so long. This is something that's been popping off in my head lately as well, is the thought of, well, what happens when we win? Like, if our whole focus is on, being reactive, stopping this, but like you say, we don't have that sort of philosophical grounding. What happens when we win? What happens when we get what we want? And I'm so glad. This sounds like this is the perfect time for this to be starting. I'm very excited that you're doing this, and clearly it's a master lineup that you have going on. So let's just, because now I'm sure people are fired up about it. So redpillexpo.org. Let me make sure I got all this right. 23rd and 24th, Bozeman, Montana. I believe that I heard you say to Jeff Berwick, though, that people need to, because it's a resort town, that people are going to need to start figuring out their hotel accommodations. Is that right? Because it's starting to pack up there. Yes,
let's talk about Bozeman. But first,
please.
To answer your question, it's a pretty big town, actually. Surprisingly, it's a college town, and they even have an international airport there.
Okay.
Very surprising, but it's internet. You can go there from all over the world. But it's not so big that you can't worry about a hotel accommodations for a group like we're bringing in. There are about 50 hotels that I saw in the Yellow Pages, but the ones that are right in the middle of town, probably about a dozen, and I think they're filling up pretty fast. But even the outskirts of town, not that far away, so it's no big deal. But nevertheless, the airfares are going up, and the closer we get to the actual date, the more expensive those will be. And it's a good idea to make your hotel reservation. We chose Bozeman for a couple of reasons. The first reason was a practical reason. The expenses were less there. Also, I was very fond of it. I'd been there a couple of times. I even had a chance to speak before a large group at the very facility that we're going to be using. Is called the Commons. It's a great conference center there. And I was blown away by the size of the group. I mean, I thought I was at the Democratic National Convention or something. I mean, huge, packed with people and banners and great facility and lighting and sound system. And I thought I was in downtown Manhattan or something. But anyway, it has a great facility, and I love the people there. It's really grassroots America. It's big sky country. And fortunately, in June, it's the best time in the world to go. I wouldn't recommend it in January or February, sure. But in June and July, it's beautiful, and people love to, spend their vacation going through that area. So a lot of people are bringing their RVs, and they're bringing their family, and when they're through, they're going to some of the national parks and see a part of the United States they never saw before. It's a great place.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll actually be I'll be making my way back from New Hampshire on the 23rd, so maybe I'll switch my plane flight around. If there's a Boston to Bozeman, there might be. I think it looks amazing.
If you can't get from Boston to Bozeman, go to Paris, and then you can get there.
There you go. Excellent. Well, before I let you go, was there anything else that you wanted to add, either on the subject of, or a message for the people, either on the subject of collectivism versus individualism, or anything that we've left out about the Red Pill Expo, or any of the other upcoming projects that you've got going on?
Well, there's so many areas of opportunity in each of those categories, but I think the important thing that we've talked about today is number one on the list. It's understanding of the ideological foundation of the world's battle for freedom. And we just scratched the surface here today. I talked about the group versus the individual, but there are many more aspects of it. And we have to talk about the origin of rights. The collectivists think that the state gives them the rights, that the state is the origin of human rights. Individualists believe no, they come with the individual at birth. They're intrinsic. Some people would say God-given rights. Others would say they're intrinsic rights. But the idea is that individualists believe that rights are hardware, they come with you. Collectivists believe that rights are software, they're added to you if you're a good kid and you do exactly as you're told. If the state thinks you're okay, then you get your rights. That's another a very important area. We could talk about that for a long time. There are things, about how do you bring about the things you want. Do you really believe in freedom, or do you believe in coercion?
Right.
The collectivists believe that if something is right or wrong, that you should force people to do what's right. Force them to do it, not convince them, but force them to do it. Whereas individualists believe, well, I'm not going to force them to do it, but I'll sure try to convince them. But if they're silly enough or corrupt enough to do something that I think they shouldn't do, as long as it doesn't affect my life, liberty, or property, I have an obligation to allow them to be free to do it.
Right.
If I want freedom to do something that someone else does not approve, then I have to be willing to grant freedom to others to do things that I do not approve. It's things like that. There are a lot of issues. And so I hope a lot of people on your program are interested in learning more about this. It's so important. And if you do, please come to our Freedom Force website. There's a lot of meat there to chew on. So, and you read all about this individualism versus collectivism issue there. And the website is freedomforceinternational.org. freedomforceinternational.org. And as I used to say, read all about it.
Excellent. Well, this has been wonderful. Whoa. I just lost my mic. We'll have to have you back on again, because as you say, there is so much to this, and it's something that is very, very important to me, and it's an important message to spread, as important as I think any message. So freedomforceinternational.org. People, please go check out redpillexpo.org. This is going to be a great beginning, I think, to a wonderful movement. G. Edward Griffin, thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom. This has been amazing, and like I say, we'll have you back, and you may very well see me up in Bozeman.
Well, I hope I do see you there, Vin. Might make a little addendum there. If people come to that site, if they use redpillexpo.net, that gives us a chance to track how they learned about this program.
Oh, fantastic.
You and from me. Org works just as well, but net helps us track it. So either one, see, Bozeman or bust.
Excellent. Bozeman or bust. Well, thank you, G. Edward Griffin. Thank you for being on. As I say, we'll see you again, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Same to you.
Bye-bye. So, Christian, really, really great stuff.
Yeah.
It's a big deal to me.
Right.
And I'm just about done with my manuscript of my new book, Self-Ownership,
Can't wait.
The Foundation of Property and Morality, and it's all about individualism versus collectivism, laying these things out. I think that once you realize, look at what we've been talking about today. We've been talking about the collectivists on one side pitted against the collectivists on the other side, and all it breeds is violence and more control, both sides vying for more control.
Yep.
Right? And pinning things on each other, and once you have that narrative going. But at the end of the day, when you decide, oh no, I'm going to start viewing people as individuals. I'm not just going to lump you into a class. I'm going to deal with you as an individual, which is one of the reasons why let's not release the names of the London attackers, right? Because when we do that, they become individuals. Now now we can't tell you what their motivations are, because their motivations might be individual motivations. Oh, no. We need them to be part of their own, part of a collective. And as long as they're nameless and faceless, they stay that way. And I think that it's so important. It's such an important place for us to be at. I'm glad that we're at that place, particularly because what the technology that we have coming, and we're going to talk a little technology now before we go, because we've got a little bit of time. The technology that we have coming is has the potential for either way. It has the potential to totally hive mind us, or it has the potential for the individual to have so much power, more power than the individual has ever had, like not needing necessarily the tribe to survive, right? Having 100% survival value, so therefore you choose who you associate with out of pure voluntarism, really.
It's awesome.
And it's so important. It's so important to be thinking about this. It's so important to be listening to people talk about this. I hope that people who have the 23rd and 24th free at least think about going up to Bozeman. I mean, it can't be that expensive, especially if you're in like the northern Midwest or Pacific Northwest. I mean, I think it's a great trip. Supposedly, there's a flight Vegas to Bozeman straight.
Wow.
So,
yeah, that's great.
I think it's going to be amazing. Let's do a little bit of talk about new technology, because it's something that's been going on, and of course it's important to the show. And we have 10 minutes left on this. Let's do this news number 3. Okay, so you know that one of my big sort of themes as we move forward is the idea of the crypto savage, which is kind of what we all are. Which is those people who are really red-pilled, those people who are really individualists, those people who are trying to embrace, and not even trying, those people who are building the new world. And the society that we've talked about, as we talked about in like London, as we talked about in Portland, that's an old culture that's playing its own game, and we're already on to something else. So the last 2 weeks, Bitcoin has really, cryptocurrency in general has absolutely broken out. And it's broken out in a way where it's like, if you are not involved, even a couple $100, like, please get onto the blockchain. I'm going to say especially Ethereum right now. That's where I really believe it's at. I think Bitcoin's got a lot of issues. If you could get some Ethereum into a wallet, or maybe even some tokens, I'm pretty invested in Swarm City, and they haven't even released their June 15th release. And already from the time I bought it back in late April, my investment's more than doubled. So, and I was on Twitter saying, go ahead and buy in. But let's talk about what's been going on with Bitcoin as of late. Let's just go straight to, we don't need to do this Vinstradamus thing. I found there's some very, very easy, interesting things that happen. One of these was, for you to understand just what crypto savagery is, there's people out there making literally billions of dollars on this stuff. The mainstream media still doesn't understand it. The one time that they cover it, or the few times that they've covered it, they really get it wrong. Let's look at this CNBC thing. It's really funny.
For Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, its record run, at least temporarily, coming to an end, and in kind of a big way. I'm sure we'll give you more on Bitcoin as we learn more. It's kind of all happening real time.
That's weird.
Yeah, I was looking at this intraday stuff here, Becky. You can't see it on my screen, and it went boom, boom, boom. 3 legs down in about 8 to 10 minutes.
Part of the reason it's run up so much is because of some of the cyber terrorism, where they're asking people to pay in cyber monetary pieces like this. That's why it ran up so much in recent days.
Yeah, look at that. That's okay. Thanks. We had the best team in the business. This is an intraday chart of Bitcoin.
Best team in the business thinks that the reason the price of Bitcoin is going up is because of the ransomware was requesting that people. Really? The total of the ransomware take was something like under $100,000. Under $100,000 of a take. That's what pushed it. Because clearly she knows what the hell she's supposed to be an expert. I would question every single thing that she said after that, because we've got some charts. Just let's throw these charts. Let's take a look at these charts. Okay, so for her, this is Bitcoin. For her saying that $100,000 moved it, well, that's interesting, because the market capitalization as of this weekend was at, $40 billion. Because I'm sure $100,000 can move the price of $40 billion.
It's ridiculous.
You see the price moving there. A lot of people were talking about this massive crash, because it went up. It went up to 2,800, and I called it. Why don't you just hit that, Vinstradamus? Because we may as well do it. Oh, of course I said it would. 2,800 has me worried. The market listened. Go back to the charts. The market listened, and there it goes. But look, it's gained right back. I think today it's probably around 2,500. I didn't even look at it today. Let's see this next chart. See what we're looking at. See what the trend is here, and why I say you should get in. This is the percentage of this is the dominance index of which coins. So you see right at the end here, Bitcoin falling off as others gaining. That purple guy, that's Ethereum. I would say grab it. People who've been in Ethereum for the last 6 months, if you bought in 6 months ago, you are absolutely winning. That other blue one is Ripple, which I really don't know too much about, but I guess there's a ton of people with Ripple. It's very, I don't know much about it. I will be completely honest. Go to the next one here. So this is the market capitalization of all the other coins, not Bitcoin. You look at May, like when you look down at the bottom there, the volume, it's like blank from May of 2013 to this May, and then you see all that activity. So this is actually a very, very, very good sign. Any healthy market has competition, and you see the competition growing. This is a great sign, because if things go wrong with Bitcoin, this means you can move on to one of the other blockchains, and the thing is they work. It's just like Visa, MasterCard, as this thing rolls out and it's got point of sale, people will be taking, look, counter markets, we'll take your cryptocurrency, we'll take Bitcoin, we'll take Ethereum, we'll take Ripple, we'll take Dash, we'll take Litecoin. So, and we'll take your credit card. but we'll take any one of those. It does not matter to us, and it's going to become easier and easier and easier. One of the ways that's going to happen, just want to talk quickly about this Prism thing, because I find it really, really interesting. This is, no, I don't even have the things about it. Very, very interesting. This was just released at, they started talking about it just in the last couple of weeks. Shapeshift is a company, if you don't know, that basically allows you to quickly and easily exchange one coin for another. And they have, I think their portfolio of coins is probably about 30 different ones. It's all the major ones, some smaller ones, some tokens. You can change Bitcoin to Swarm City tokens and back. It's very, very fast. It's very easy. They take a pretty small percentage, and what they're actually going to introduce is a means of a decentralized portfolio. This is a very interesting concept. Hopefully we can get Eric Voorhees on to talk about this, but basically what it is if you imagined it's Merrill Lynch, it's a broker, or it's E-Trade, except there's no E-Trade. It's completely decentralized, it's person to person, and it's run on smart contracts inside the blockchain. Basically, you say, I'm willing to sell Bitcoin at this price, or I'm willing to sell Ethereum at this price. Someone else says, I'm willing to buy it if it goes to that price. And then if and when it goes to that price, the exchange happens all on its own. No third party. The third party is the blockchain itself. So things are about to get super interesting. This, you could imagine, for those people who are like, oh, the big financial firms, the banksters who run the world. Well, they run the world because they are brokering these sorts of deals. And when you take that out and you move it all onto the blockchain and the code is law, it becomes very, very, very interesting. Let's, speaking of the law, and let's end with this because I think it's important, Christian. Let's go to this Ross story. So, as you know, from the very beginning of, do we have it? Yeah, from the very beginning of this show, literally from the first episode, and even recently as we had Lynn Ulbricht back on the show, we've been following the story of Ross Ulbricht. It's important when it comes to not just cryptocurrency, not just free speech, not just the legalization of narcotics, and the reduction of violence associated with narcotics, but it's also important in terms of our story about the internet starting to be shut down. Ross is, it's funny because when Lynn Ulbricht was on, I said that Ross Ulbricht was our Nelson Mandela. And ironically, someone from South Africa sent me an email saying that that was inappropriate, that Ross is a peaceful person, and that Nelson Mandela was a terrorist and a violent person, and that he shouldn't be associated with Ross. And I found it I find it ironic because Ross is being treated as a terrorist. Regardless of what his actions were, Ross is being treated as a terrorist for being nonviolent. He's got 2 life terms, 2 life sentences. And as we see that the internet is starting to be, well, at least the British and the Americans will follow suit, all of the West want to shut the internet down in the name of saving us from terrorism. And part of that is shutting down the dark web, Tor, where Silk Road was. Part of that is shutting down cryptocurrencies. It's all part of the same thing. So really what I'm saying in that regard is that just like the release of Nelson Mandela from prison was the hallmark and the symbol of the end of apartheid, that our freedom will be marked by the release of Ross Ulbricht. And that's looking like it's perhaps more difficult, the fight, if you want to go back to this. Silk Road appeal, Silk Road creator Ross Ulbricht loses life sentence appeal. After more than 5 years, the saga of the Dread Pirate Roberts, this is from Wired, the saga of the Dread Pirate Roberts has ended, and the founder of the Silk Road has lost his last chance of escaping a lifetime in prison. On Wednesday, a Second Circuit appellate court rejected the appeal of Ross Ulbricht, who 2 years ago was sentenced to life in prison without parole for creating and running the Silk Road, a massive dark web drug market. Ulbricht, who used the Dread Pirate Roberts pseudonym, had persistently fought his conviction for crimes including drug trafficking and money laundering, as well as his unexpectedly harsh life sentence. He and his lawyers pointed to what they described as illegal searches in the investigation, the involvement of at least 2 federal agents now proven to be corrupt, and Ulbricht's draconian punishment for what they described as nonviolent crimes. The 3-judge appellate panel, nonetheless, affirmed the decision of the lower court, albeit with notes of muted criticism of American drug laws. So, Christian, I don't know whether or not I'm sure they're going to appeal this up to the Supreme Court, and I hope that it goes there. It's important that people don't stop talking about this. It's important that Ross's story stays in the front of mind, that people coming new into the movement know who he is, know about what he did, know about the Silk Road, because I really do feel like it is the metric. We will know that we have our individual freedom and that we have won against the collectivists when a Silk Road can happen. And I think that that's why it's important to support all this decentralization that's coming.
Absolutely.
To support things like Swarm City, to support cryptocurrency. If you want to engage in individual revolution, the revolution is evolution. So Ross evolved much quicker. He set forward, he built something based on his ideals at a time that no one else did. And because he was the nail sticking up, he's getting hammered down. It's important that we all stand up and that we all take these steps and we show that it's not criminal to control your own money, to control your own body, to control your own source of information, and to allow people to freely exchange between themselves. It's very, very important.
Absolutely. It's great.
With that, bro.
Great show.
Great show. Got through it all. I'm buzzing. It was a great show, important show, man. Let me say goodbye to the people. Well, where'd I go? Is that camera 1? Did I turn off?
Yeah.
I tell you what, let's just go back to us then. We lost battery on camera 1. So we'll just do this like this. We will be back again next week, Monday, 10 a.m. I really want to thank our guest, G. Edward Griffin, for coming on. Wonderful discussion. I encourage everybody to go check out redpillexpo.net and give a look. Bozeman, Montana, June 23rd to 24th. I mean, the speaker list is amazing. Really go and check that out. If you're going to go to one conference this year, that's the place to really open and free your mind. If you want to check out this show in archive, you can do that on iTunes and Stitcher. That's the audio podcast. If you want to watch the whole thing, you can do it at youtube.com/Vin Armani. You can also do it at youtube.com/activistpost, where you're going to get the best of, all sort of chopped up. So I want to thank, as always, I'll thank you, Christian, with you here on camera. Thank you for being here. 32 weeks in, man. It's been amazing. It's a great run, and it's growing. We've got such great guests planned for you coming up this month. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So until we see you next week, stay free.